Well, welcome back to Scotty Movies, everybody. There's a lot of movies about twins out there. It seems like it's a pretty interesting concept for filmmakers to go through. There's comedies like The Parent Trap. There's Adaptation. There's a couple of other, um, The Prestige and things like that. That we'll talk about one later on in '88 called Twins. Believe it or not, which is a comedy and but you're not going to find many twins movies as disturbingly evocative and thrilling and horrifying as the one we're going to talk about today. It's called Dead Ringers, starring Jeremy Irons in the role of two identical twins. So let's talk about what Dead Ringers is about and then get into the review. So, Dead Ringers is directed by body horror maestro David Cronenberg, and it follows twin gynecologists Elliot and Beverly Mantle. Uh, the Mantle twins are kind of like one person split into two bodies. They share everything: patients, accolades, apartments, even lovers. That might sound like a twisted setup for some weird soap opera, but in this one, there's nothing about it that's campy. The cracks start to form when Beverly, who's shy, anxious, uh, and different in his personality than Elliot, falls in love with an actress named Claire, played by Genevieve Bujold. That emotional attachment sends the whole delicate house of cards crumbling because what follows is a slow surgical dissection of mental breakdown, toxic enmeshment, and identity loss. What with a lot of surgical tools and blue cold lighting, um, as, as they kind of lose grasp on Beverly in particular and who he is, and then that sends Elliot down a weird path as well that he doesn't know who he is. So first of all, let's talk about the horror of this movie. It is a horror, and it's by David Cronenberg, who is known before this movie as a body horror guy, which is grotesque um, invasion of weird things happening to bodies. Uh, that's the case in this movie too, because they're gynecologists and they're working uh, on women's reproductive systems, but in in reality, they're just trying to be an expert in a particular area of gynecology, um, and the way that most movies are when it comes to horror is a lot of jump scares, uh, or serial killers or demons or whatever it may be. This movie has none of that. What it does have is a creeping sense of dread that starts in the background and slowly starts to move closer until it's breathing down your neck. This is psychological horror turned all the way up to 11. Beverly's descent into paranoia, addiction, and delusion is really brutal to watch because David Cronenberg grounds it in reality. There's no fantasy escape here. There's nothing that's happening that's set in another universe or another world. This is happening right here on Earth, right here in this time period. It's just a man that's slowly losing touch with who he is and dragging his twin brother along with him, and us as viewers as well. The horror is not just physical, although there's a lot of that. Uh, as both Beverly and Elliot create these instruments, can kind of patent them for the exploration of female reproductive systems. It's really brutal to watch. It's really horrifying at times, especially when one of um, the surgeries goes very wrong. Um, and it's really horrifying to watch. But the horror is not just physical; it's emotional. It's the horror of losing control of one's mind, of not knowing where you end and someone else begins. In this case, because they're twins and they're so connected, they share everything. It's already a fragile walk there, fragile line to walk. Um, some of the medical imagery is really intense, and I've talked about it a little bit there. Cronenberg does not hold back. The surgical tools in this movie are not just props, they're symbols. They're cold, they're precise, they're invasive, they're they look like weapons. Uh, because that's essentially what these twins are turning them into to probe around and mess with women's interior systems. They represent control, but also obsession, power, but also vulnerability. And watching Beverly design these special tools for mutated female anatomy, which he wants to specialize in, tools that clearly exist only in his increasingly diluted mind, it's straight up disturbing. And that's the point. Dead Ringers wants us to be disturbed. It wants us to squirm, not because it's gross, though it really is, but because it's asking you to look how easily that power can warp someone, that power can become perverse, especially in medicine, especially when empathy is replaced by ego. Let's talk about Jeremy Irons. Because he plays both of these characters, Beverly and Elliot, who are, you know, very close to the same person, except their personalities are widely different. Elliot is much more um, extroverted, while Beverly is much more introverted. Beverly really relies on Elliot for a lot of the things that come his way. He's very submissive, while Elliot is the strong one, uh, and so when that sort of thing kind of flips near the end, it becomes uh, really interesting and really disturbing. Uh, and so he plays both of these characters so well. He plays them with such nuance that you instantly know which one you're watching. Uh, and obviously, it's Jeremy Irons playing both roles. He looks identical. The twins are identical, but you know which one is which, even when they're in the same room. Because Elliot is this confident, composed, slick guy, and Beverly is twitchy, vulnerable, spiraling. And he plays these differences without leaning on these obvious gimmicks. It's all about body language, voice control, intention. You forget that you're watching the same actor at times because it's so different, and they're in the same room, on the same screen, sharing it with each other. That's how good he is. It's not just impressive; it's really kind of freaky. Underneath all of the disturbing visuals and dialogue for this movie, there's really a heartbreakingly simple idea. What happens when you don't know who you are without someone else? Uh, I think a lot of us feel that way sometimes with spouses, that we've been together so long it feels like we've never been apart. We get that idea. Maybe the same exists with brothers and sisters, but this is identical twin brothers who share everything, who got into the same profession, who intentionally swap, even when they're, you know, mid uh, date with woman. They intentionally switch because it gives them some thrills to be able to do that, to be able to control the environment and let each twin have a chance to do what he wants to do. It's really perverse. Um, so what happens when one of those twins starts to really slide down a emotional breakdown, mental breakdown, and lose who he is? The other one, you suddenly become so far apart from each other that you don't know how to reconcile that. You don't know how to live without the other one. It's obviously a metaphor for conjoined twins, because these twins are conjoined after birth. They're conjoined between a mental connection, and when that begins to split, what happens when you have to, in the hospital, when you have to destroy the link between conjoined twins? Oftentimes, both end up dead. Um, so uh, there's two villains in Dead Ringers. It's Jeremy Irons playing both roles, but we're not really there's not really a protagonist either. There's just these two guys that we're watching slowly collapsing under the weight of their own bond, and watching the collapse is deeply, deeply unsettling. Dead Ringers is not a easy film to watch. It's clinical, it's deeply unsettling, but it's also brilliant. Cronenberg dials down the gore, ramps up the dread, gives us something more insidious and lingering than most horror movies really ever touch. It's the horror of the mind, the horror of mental collapse affecting another person. It's about identity, mental health, power, obsession. What happens when the line between you and them disappears entirely? If you're up for a kind of film that'll haunt your brain for days, can force you to confront some deeply uncomfortable questions, this is a great one to watch. What would my grade be for Dead Ringers? Um, Considering that it's not going to be for everyone because horror is not for everyone, and this particular kind of horror is downright disturbing. I'm giving it an A minus. I think it would be an A if all of those things were removed. It's definitely disturbing. It's masterful in its execution, with one of the greatest dual performances that you'll ever see. Uh, Cronenberg's icy precision behind the camera. Dead Ringers is a psychological horror. Just don't watch it while eating. So I'm going to give it an A minus. Have you seen Dead Ringers? What do you think about it? Is it that cinematic psychological masterpiece, or is it too much to handle, or just the right kind of messed up? Let me know in the comments if you've seen it, what you think about it. Let me know if you want to see it after this review. Um, so thanks for watching. Remember that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones that look exactly like you. I'll leave you with that thought. Thanks, everyone.